All right, yeah, let's jump in, Seb. Brent, if you could introduce yourself.
I'm Brent Scotchmer. I am an illustrator and a lifelong collector of many things. Born in '83, based in Australia. If you collected it in between the '80s and the early 2000s, I probably collected it as well and have seen it. I work on things like Star Wars and Garbage Pail Kids doing artwork. I work with the company Pog, the milk cap game that you would remember from the '90s. And I'm just an all-round, just engulfed in pop culture.
How many guests do we get, Brandon, that throw out so many amazing things in one sentence and act like they've just said nothing? I mean, Star
For
Wars,
those
Pog, Garbage
listening,
Pail Kids, just like
yeah, for those listening, you may remember Brent from our Pogcast with the Pog crew. But we decided to get Brent back because he has an extensive history in collecting both toys and video games and in collectibles, and we wanted to talk with Brent to kind of get his opinions on the future of collecting and also what he's done in the past and what he collected.
so like with the Pog one we did before, we had so many kind of questions and like a structure. And when we came off that, me and Brandon were just saying, Brent just got so many cool stories from like the first half an
I
hour of us just chatting. So
and it's like since I was 6 years old, it just on a weird little journey. Things like I didn't collect vintage Star Wars toys until I literally tripped over them while I was collecting video games, and then just that one thing at a swap meet, it just changed everything. Like it just
Mm.
changed because then it led me to being in the Star Wars collecting community, which then got me into the Star Wars Tops artwork community. And these things just roll on. So like you can kind of like, and I'm like a super like woo woo person or anything, but like it's almost as if like
It happened for a
tearing
reason.
open a yeah, if you remember the first time you ripped open a pack of cards, if you knew that like that was gonna be the beginning
Mm.
of like, you know what I mean? Like some kids picked up a I had asthma as a kid, so I didn't pick up a football or any, like it was just different. Like so
Mm.
some kids picked up footy and went and became super like sports kids, and then other kids, collected cards and played games, and um I'm totally aware that like I get to sort of live a life in those fields now, so that's pretty special. Just like you guys get to have you know a, a a show that is focused around them. Now I'm in my studio, so I'm on a much better setup now. So everything's in HD, and I've got in-ear
nice.
monitors and stuff. So like I can see all of the stuff on your shelves a lot better now, and I'm like, oh, I can see Micro Machines, and I can see a Game Boy, and I can see N64 cartridges up there, um,
Hmm.
and all of that stuff is just even though I'm not actively collecting video games anymore, that like stuff I still love it. I still love it so much. Even when I find stuff now, it's still. I've owned hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of N64 consoles or Sega Master Systems and stuff. But honestly, every time I see one, like in the wild, like if I just see one that's lying around, it still just makes me so happy that it didn't
Mm.
end up on the tip. Like, I have this. I'll send you the photo because this is a total like, and let me know if you rein me in whenever you need to. But like,
Sure.
total moment last night, right? Was I picked up some trading card stuff, and there were a few loose packs of like 1994 Skybox basketball, and I was like, I really only collect full boxes, not necessarily loose packs of basketball. And so I was like, you know what? Every night when we go upstairs and the kids having a shower and getting ready for bed, I'm just gonna sit in my office and just open two packs of basketball cards, and that'll just be like a little fun thing for me. And
Yeah,
last night I ripped open and I got a Michael Jordan Dynamic Dunks insert, and
Damn.
it's a $20 card, like it's
Yeah.
nothing, but if I'd have hit that as an 8-year old, like
through the
that's like
roof.
that's like
Dopamine.
that's the hit.
Yeah.
That's the absolute like pinnacle of anything I could have pulled out of a 75-cent pack as a kid. And I just sat there for a minute, not thinking about how cool the card was, but how cool it felt. I was sitting there as like this 41-year-old guy going like, if I was 8 years old, I'd be losing my shit right now. Like, yeah, like, and so like, it's cool when you get to have those little, you still get to have those little like moments every now and then. Like I don't think that, even though I've probably seen everything, I've seen most things in toys and video games. It doesn't mean that those things aren't just so cool.
Are you right? Like, I remember at school there were the kids who were always like playing cricket or wanting to go out and play tennis, and then there was my group of friends that were trading Pokemon cards. And like Brandon and I have built a website and again a podcast now, talking to people who were exactly like us and still are like us. I'm like, this morning I've been playing Donkey Kong Land 3, and I'm just like, the fact that we all get to do the stuff that we love, because so many people do lose that magic you were talking about. So many people do just forget like the magic of opening a set of Pokemon cards, or the beauty of blowing a N64 cart and sticking it in and playing Mario Kart for the first time. Like, you get the guys who kind of grow up and move on and don't play these anymore, or you get the people like Brandon showing these things to his son. And you get people who I saw a video yesterday of somebody teaching their child how to blow a SNES cart to play it, and I was like, that's just so magical. 90s kids, now parents, showing their kids how to blow SNES carts to get the games working and stuff. It's amazing. So I'm glad that people like you do this and keep this alive and stuff.
I did that same thing the other week. I had because I have this industrial paint finish place. I've got special effects and stuff that I can do, and I had this old Japanese Sega Saturn that I'd bought as junk. It was all yellowed and terrible looking. And so I themed it out. It's all custom painted to look as if, like, what if Apple made the Sega Saturn? So everything's all smoothed out and it's all white and grey and it's all lovely. And I took it home and showed my 5-year-old Sega Rally, and just showed them like this was my game. And like even me just going like, damn, you forgot how small the TVs were that you were playing on, because you can't sit nothing's in HD, so you can't sit close to the TV. The whole point was you had to sit across the room, because that's the only way you could make out the make out the picture. But then I popped the N64 in and got her on. I was like, well, we got a Nintendo Switch, and she has a go on Mario Kart, and you get it on all the easy settings, and it's okay. But I thought, what would be great would be Super Mario 64, because that opening level is just open world, and you can't get yourself in too much trouble. In there, it's pretty hard to die in those sort of like just outside the castle area, and she loved it, and we were just sitting back, just going like, "Isn't this crazy?" Like she was born in 2019.
Yeah. And those games aren't overwhelming at all at the start, are they? I feel like traditional modern games now, they just kind of overwhelm you with like menus, just stuff in your face from level 1, whereas I feel like back in the day it was quite a warm, slow introduction. You understand the story, which you had to read and kind of take time to consider. Yeah, you had to get out the manual to understand what the fuck you're doing. But now it's just completely different.
I think that's the ADHD in everyone, I think.
Yeah, I'm bad for it, to be honest. So Brent, my first question is, what got you into collecting, and how old were you when you first decided to collect something?
Yeah, I'd say, born in 83, I'm about 6 years old. So what's that, puts me in like 89. The first thing I'm collecting is probably trading cards, something that's got a stick of bubble gum in it. For me, that was the Garbage Gang, nice. Which is the Australian version of the Garbage Pail Kids that are known in the US. So 5 stickers and a stick of gum gives you something to stick on your school books, and some terrible gum to probably throw out. And and things like that. We used to have all kinds of like candies and gums that you would unwrap, and there'd be a temporary tattoo, or there'd be some stickers and that. And I've never been like, I've always been someone who just kind of held on to those. Always been a really artistic person, and so like I could never really bring myself to peel the stickers off and put them on things, or to or to even use the temporary tattoo. To be honest, I would keep temporary tattoos as if they were like trading cards, because just had these cool images on them. and if I use them on my arm, I've only got 3 or 4 days, and then that
Yeah.
cool, like, weird monster character is gone. So, definitely, trading cards, non-sport, everything, your Keaton Batman and Roger Rabbit and
Did you have Go-Go Crazy Bones in Australia? I'm sure you did. They were a
No.
bit later when they. No, all right. We had
Well,
like little.
we may have, but Go-Go Crazy Bones?
Kind of
They're
little
like,
monsters.
Sorry?
Have you got some kicking around there? They're like little monsters. They were kind of like the same consistency as a marble, I guess, but they were tiny monsters in different shapes and sizes and
You
colours.
flick them. They come in they come in packs, like little booster packs. You open them up, you get like 4, and
they
there's
be
usually
like-
a rare one.
Would they be like Monster in My Pocket?
Now, Monster in My Pocket, is that Australian?
Monster in My Pocket's like, they're little monster characters, but they were like soft and rubbery like silicon.
Oh no, the kind of like the pencil topper troll things, or like the little weird googly guys. The Go-Go Crazy. We might have just unlocked something new that Brent has to start collecting, Brandon. And if we do,
Oh,
his
don't
family's
get me
going to be so angry at us because he's going to spend so much money.
We called them boneheads here in the UK. Like little
Right.
plastic characters, and you're designed to flick them, but you ended up just having bleeding fingernails because you just end up hurting yourself. But they were quite cool. I'm surprised you didn't have them in Australia. They are a bit later, to be fair, probably mid-90s, to be honest.
To be fair,
Okay, so maybe...
This is from a country of people who used to just like put conkers on string and just hit each other in playgrounds, dude. So like, throwing Go-Go Crazy Bones at each other. That's like, the UK just had weird playground games, I guess.
No, I don't. I'm looking at them now. No, I don't remember these at all. So you said, what, late 90s?
Yeah.
So, yeah, late 90s, I'm probably starting to pick up a guitar or something like that, and moving away from toys necessarily before I sort of get into other things. But they look familiar, they look like a lot of other, almost like you said they're hard like marbles,
Yeah, they're really hard.
and you would use them like paddle them, like throw them at each other.
Yeah, you'd set up like 10 in like a triangle formation, and then your team, your opponent would do the same, and you'd flick one at your like almost like Skittles or bowling, and then you'd take the
Yeah.
ones that you hit, and it was last man standing pretty much.
It's almost like a game of pool.
Yeah, pretty much. An expensive game of pool.
If you mixed Pogs, pool, and pain together, then that's what, boneheads
Yeah.
were.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's something new to me.
So in the late 80s then, early 90s, you must have started getting into video games, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was a Sega kid, Sega Master System, Sega Mega Drive, this is probably early 90s, when definitely remember having the Sega Master System, definitely remember getting a second-hand Sega Mega Drive because at the time they were really expensive. We actually got one, ran into someone taking a Sega Mega Drive into a pawn shop, and they must have lowballed them like crazy, and he'd left with it still, and then struck a deal with the guy in the car park of the pawnbroker, and got my Sega Mega Drive with Altered Beast, sort of in box,
Nice.
sort of collection with it. So yeah, definitely remember that. My favorite game on Mega Drive, Columns. I know that's kind of super boring,
Oh yeah,
but
cool.
I love
No,
Columns.
It's a classic, man. It's a classic.
Yeah, I don't know why. I just, it's just an easy for me. Quick games seem to work best. Like my attention span was never super great, and the frustrating thing about a lot of those, especially those Sega consoles like Alex Kidd and Sonic the Hedgehog and stuff, is that none of them really had save functions, and so there was only like Sonic the Hedgehog. I reckon that as a child, I never probably got past Chemical Zone because I'd play for like half an hour, I'd lose all my lives, and then I'd just get on a bike and go ride around somewhere else instead. But again, very artwork focused, like you would know, like everyone did. You were buying off the face of the box. So, I mean, like I said Altered Beast, right? And you'd probably know, if you're someone who knows that game, like if you close your eyes and you think Altered Beast, you immediately think of that so cool painting of like this buff like wolf dude, and you know, and that's still all I really remember. Like I have to think a lot harder to think of like what the game looked like gameplay looked like, than I do if I just had to sort of remember what the artwork looked like, and that goes the same for for everything, you know, for all those video games. As you would buy the box, or you would get the box, and you're like, Jesus, this looks like amazing. Like this game must be this game must just be the pinnacle of video games, and then you put it in, and not always the case. So.
Boring.
It's weird going back now as well. Like I recently just reviewed the Spectrum from Retro Games, which has got like tons and tons of old Spectrum games on there. And I was talking to my mates who had one as kids, and they were saying they used to have to put it on, go out for half an hour, play football, come back when it had like warmed up and loaded up, and then like half the time the game would have just like crashed. But when it did load, they'd sit down and they'd play, you know, these games that were just so incredible for the time. And then going through it now, yeah. And then going through now on the Spectrum and revisiting those games that, like, you know, that we do play on the ZX Spectrum still, but like when you just go back and look at them, I've went from playing God of War to testing out some of these like super simple games, and you just think like we've come so far since then. You know, we've come so far since these like these games that you just thought nothing can get better than this. Nothing can get better than a tiny little guy skiing down these ramps and everything. Yeah, exactly.
You know, is that like I read just when you said the Sinclair Spectrum, I was just like, oh yeah, the cassette decks, you know, like actual cassette tapes that would load games and stuff. But yeah, like your imagination had to make up for so much, right? Like you look at any of those Commodore 64, Sinclair Spectrum, any of those sort of original Atari consoles. I mean, to say that your imagination played a big part in it is like the biggest understatement ever. I mean, it's you're literally chasing dots on a screen, you know, but if you link something to it, like say, you know, it's Ghostbusters. So as soon as you see the game on the screen, you just go, right, there's a game here. But then if you know that it's Ghostbusters, now all of a sudden you're not looking at the pixels, you're looking at the characters, and you're just making up, like you're filling in so many gaps, like in those games. And I find that hard now. Like I would find it really hard to review something like one of the throwback flashback consoles or stuff, those Sinclair games is because my imagination is just not there anymore for that, you know, to be able to like really sit down and be so invested, especially since that, like you were saying you were playing you were saying earlier that you were playing Donkey Kong Country 3. That's Game Boy, right?
Donkey Kong Land 3, yeah, they've just dropped it on the Switch now, and it's all green dot matrix, you know, screen like the original DMG and everything, and you're looking at it, and it is mad. But like, you know, playing it on my Switch on the Nitro deck, and then you're looking and you've got these nostalgic visuals. Like that was the handheld that I had as a kid, you know, my little yellow DMG, and I've got a yellow chromatic coming, Mod Retro chromatic, just to sort of like have that kind of nostalgia all these years on. But when you see it, you know, it's just, again, you know, from playing Echoes of Wisdom on the Switch and going back and then, you know, immediately going to Donkey Kong Land 3, it's just we've come so far, it's wild. But we still are drawn back to these games that... Go on, sorry, man.
You have to enjoy it, like, because, like, I remember being a video game collector, I've found, you know, old stuff that still had price tags on it, and a couple of times going like, well, some kid really had to enjoy this because their mum spent $70 on it, you know, like, and $70
and back then, $70.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. And I've found some terrible games with, like, you know, Superman 64, N64, like with like a $99 price tag on it, and just going like, woof, that's hard work.
I've got Mario Tennis up here that's still got the original. It's my original copy for the N64, and it's still got the Electronics Boutique sticker on it. It was £45 when I got that. And I mean, I remember buying that from Sainsbury's when I was a kid, and I was like, Mum, can I get this? And I remember looking, thinking, like, and I was like, why have you got that face? But £45 was a lot of money for, you know, and it's, you know, you're buying Zelda games and stuff now that cost £45, but back then, Mario Tennis, still the same price tag. And that was like heck of a lot of money. But Nintendo games, for some reason, they still maintain that price as well. Like, That's probably worth
Yeah,
about £8 million now, and that's not an exaggeration.
yeah. Well, I mean, you're talking about a time when like all my family's from my family's all from Britain as well, and you're talking about a time when you're saying a game was 45 quid, and like that's a time when my grandma is sending me £5 note in the mail.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like so that goes to show you that like if my birthday present is £5 in 1994, like then paying £50 for like Mario Tennis is just like, yeah, it's quite a feat.
She probably looked at the shopping in the trolley and thought, this tiny cardboard box is worth more than the week's shop or something like that. Like,
The
what the
week's
hell is going on
groceries.
here? Yeah, exactly. We've got sausages, bananas, and everything, and then there's this, this Mario and this bloody tennis racket on this cardboard box. But
and there's you just blowing into the cartridge of your spit.
Yeah.
Your nan's just
Good.
there like, oh Lord.
So you to take it. I mean, this podcast, there's so many questions that we want to ask you. This podcast is going to go back and forward so many times. But you mentioned at the beginning that you've worked on Star Wars and Garbage Pail Kids and stuff. Like you mentioned, you grew up collecting these things, and then you find yourself working for the brands and the things you've been watching as a kid. Like, how do you get into that? How were you doing that? And how does somebody who's loving these things as a child and then gets to work on them as an adult, like, it must be a dream come true, right? Like, same with Pogs as well. We chatted to you before about you collecting Pogs in the playground and then suddenly you're designing all the artwork for them. How do you get into that, and how does it feel doing that on a day-to-day basis?
Oh yeah, I mean on a day to day on a day to day basis, it's work. Like there's a job that needs doing. Like I'm about to start another job for Tops and Star Wars now, and I've got a full adult schedule. So like it's not I still love it because it's kind of crazy that I get to do that they send me stuff that and if you know what Disney's like, they don't let you do anything. Like as soon as you start
Yeah,
using their
it's tight.
brand without them, they're happy to come and clamp down on you. So like for me to have permission to be able to work with their brand is fantastic. For people who want to get into it, it was just a case of putting it out there. I had so I mean the story is that I lived a childhood, and then when I'm 18, 19, I meet my wife, and we have a kid almost straight away. And so the focus becomes work. I get into the glass industry, and then I eventually start a glass company. So that takes up a huge chunk of my life, and it's very busy, and it's very stressful. And after about, I guess, many years into this, we decided to go on holiday to the East Coast, to the Gold Coast in Australia, and I was on sort of following at the time. What was I collecting at the time? I might have been doing some video games and stuff, and so I was on these groups, people collecting things, and I thought, oh, it'd be great. I used to draw a lot as a kid. Like I used to really love drawing Garbage Gang, Sonic the Hedgehog, things like this, and I'll take a little notepad and some little like sort of blank trading card things that I had a friend sort of just cut up, print up for me, and I'll just do some sketches on them, and at least that'll kill some time while we're sitting around. And I did that, put them up on Facebook. Look what I did. And people in those fan groups noticed it, and then you'd be surprised at how many people who lurk around in those groups on Facebook, whether it's video games, trading cards, fans of particular brands like Pog or Star Wars. You'd be surprised at how many people who work for those companies are lurking around in those places, and that's exactly what happened. Is one of them, a lady from the UK, actually, Marsha Parkins. She messaged me and said, like, hey, instead of doing this unofficial stuff, like, why don't you do some official stuff? Let me put you in contact with the art director at Tops. And then it just went from there. And I think my first job was, it was called Journey to the Force Awakens for Star Wars. That was in 2017. Then I did some work on The Walking Dead, a few sets for them. And I knew that Garbage Pail Kids was happening on the side, but it was a different sort of department. And so I sort of really tried really hard to get in with those, because that was the one I was like, if I could, honestly, I would give almost all of it away if I could get to work with Garbage Pail Kids. And then I had to go the long way. I had to do wacky packages, and then I got into Garbage Pail Kids. So, and I love doing it. I still love doing Garbage Pail Kids, those characters still put a smile on my face like all the time. They're just they're such a hilarious concept, really, to think that, you know, a parody on Cabbage Patch Dolls became a multi-million-dollar brand, and is still today. Like, you know, there's Monopoly with Garbage Pail Kids. There's calendars that come out every year. Like, there's anything you can think of with Garbage Pail Kids, they have. So, you know, great brand with a long life. Same with Star Wars. Star Wars is just, you know, there you've got different generations of people. I never went into the animated stuff. I was sort of, again, born in '83. So even with me, I'm at the tail end. I would say probably the first Star Wars movie I ever saw was probably one of the Ewoks movies that came out, if you remember those. And then I had to sort of go back as I got older. So, yeah, it's amazing getting to work with brands, getting to sort of find out that an IP is coming up. You know, I had the similar experiences with Ultraman and Child's Play, Dawn of the Dead, Evil Dead, all the Rob Zombie horror movies I've done trading card artwork for, and then ended up having a piece of George Romero, who was the original sort of zombie movie director. He, I have a painting of him in his museum that his wife has together and stuff, and so
Wow,
yeah, I've gotten to do some really cool stuff. I actually don't really get to think about it much until people ask me, so it's nice when people ask me, like, what have you done? And I think, oh yeah, I've done some pretty cool stuff.
what are you collecting nowadays then, and why? I guess I think you're a bit like me, where you like to collect things that are nostalgic, that you have a relationship with as a child, but also things that, you know, I'll admit, I sometimes buy things because I know they're going to be an investment in 10 to 20 years time, and maybe something I give my kids to just sell if they ever need a bit of cash. So I would say I've got maybe like a 50-50 ratio between stuff that I'm just genuinely nostalgic about, and then 50% that it's kind of like an investment. So I'm interested into seeing what you collect and why.
Yeah, my collecting history sort of goes in waves, because it'll usually be all in on one thing, and then it explodes and becomes huge. So like when I started collecting video games, it was just like exploded, and I had 7,000 video games and 400 consoles, and an entire room in my house built to house it all and display it all. And
are they actual figures, or is that an exaggeration?
no, real figures. Yeah, yeah. When I sold the collection, I had 6,500 video games with no doubles.
Are they boxed?
And yes. Oh no, there were a mixture. Depends. So like, if I could get them, if I found them boxed, they'd be boxed. But that would be no double, so there wouldn't be like a loose one and a box one. I just had the best or most complete version of each one. So
that's wild.
Near complete collections of like Sega Master System, Sega Mega Drive, and some other, and then like virtually complete collections of stuff like Neo Geo CD, and stuff that I could get in from Japan. So
wow.
And like 400 consoles I had doubles of, because I would collect the different boxes. So I'd have the Super NES single controller, then the double controller, then the one that came with Australian Test Cricket, then the one that came with Nigel Mansell's F1, then the one that came with Street Fighter 2.
Where are you storing all of this?
Well, I don't have it anymore, but there was, at the time when I was sort of deep into it, like this is when am I talking about? So I'm talking about 2000 and I want to say 2009 through to 2015. This is the time when I could go to a garage sale, swap meet, Gumtree, anything like that, and you could pick up consoles for $20.
I was going to say, that feels like it's just before the boom where things started increasing quite substantially, and then you got to COVID where things just took off.
Yeah, if you were doing that now, you'd have to get like a small fortune to do it. You'd be walking around with like a briefcase full of cash all the time.
Well, I'll walk you through how that lived and died. So I through that time, at that time, I could drive to a swap meet. I could fill my whole car up with retro games for a couple of $100. There were definitely other people out there hunting and looking, and there were definitely, this is, maybe right before anyone had even just thought that opening an entire store for retro games was a good idea. This is just right on the cusp of that. So I went hardcore for those 6 or 7 years and just picked up thousands, and like 90% of everything that I told you, 6,000 games and 400 consoles, 99% of it I found in Perth, Western Australia, in person, in my hands. None of it bought on eBay, not a single thing bought on eBay unless it was a Japanese import console. So the only things I ever bought on eBay ever were a Virtual Boy, and Neo Geo CD, and a Panasonic 3DO. They were the only three things and the games for them were the only ones I'd ever bought on eBay. Everything else I found here, and I found some incredibly rare and unusual things over that time. I got to the point where people knew me, like where people would know, hey, I'm a guy who's got cash, and so we'd have roadside collections where if you had trash, you just put it out on the verge, and I knew guys who were like postal workers who would go and just dig up consoles, and then every 4 months they'd get me around to their house and I'd give them $5,000 for an entire living room full of video games. And that happened many, many, many times. So I get to this point where I've just got this huge collection of video games, and right at the end of that, I am at a swap meet, and somebody opens up like a bin bag, like a trash bag, and all these toys come out of it that have all still got Toy World stickers on them, which is our toy franchise. And they're from the 80s and 90s. And I'm like, oh shit. So I go up, and they had these 4 Star Wars figures that are from 1985, I find out later. How much do you want for them each? $5 each. Cool. They've got to be worth $5 each. These are still brand new Star Wars toys from 1985. Turns out, like, 2 of them are Yak Face and Anakin Skywalker. These are Power of the Force. So anyone who's listening to this, Power of the Force, 1985, the figure came with like a medallion or a coin on the card. Those 2 that I found for $5 each turned out to be some of the most pristine and rarest figures on Earth. That $20 I spent, when I sold them, I made $20,000.
Whoa!
Jesus. I need to go looking through some bins, man. I need to go to Perth.
Let's get some flights booked now, and we'll just go dumpster diving. Yeah,
it's funny you say that because I have a friend who runs a retro gaming shop. It's called Retrospect, about an hour's drive from me, and he runs a store, so a lot of stuff comes to him. It's quite a good funnel actually, where people just come and say, "Here you go," and he'll offer what he can. But he bought a box of just tiny little Star Wars figures. I don't know, maybe chuck the guy 50, 100 quid. Turns out there was 3 in there, maybe from the 80s. I don't know exactly what they are, but they almost look fake. They look like fake little Star Wars figures of R2D2 and C3PO, and he's selling them currently in his shop for 700 quid a pop. So it's still happening now, and that was like 6 months ago. Like, these stories are quite frequent if you are a collector, and if you're someone who's deemed an expert in the area, and then people just come to you, which I think is such a great funnel, and something that I wish we could do, because, you know, even online we're known for our retro gaming stuff, but, you know, we don't really get anything rare, do we, Seb? You know, we get in the new products, which we kind of keep if we need to, but we never get anything vintage come through our doors that is, you know, rare in a sense.
I mean, I put myself out there a lot. I would go to 7 swap meets every Sunday morning, starting at 3 a.m. through till about 9 a.m. You know, the reason I have a lot of crazy stories of finding things, both toys, games, whatever, is because I put myself out there in the biggest way possible. So not only did I went to 7 different swap meets every Sunday morning starting at 3 a.m. I did that for 7 years straight, and I built relationships with people, because I would say, if I saw someone at a flea market and they didn't have video games, but they had other things that were like video games, maybe they had VHS tapes, maybe they had a couple of He-Man figures or something, I would say, do you have video games? And they would say, what do you mean? And I would say, like, old stuff with like a cartridge that goes in the top or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, I didn't even think to bring them because I thought they'd just be trash.
What a time! What a time!
And the amount, like, I easily 50 times I've bought video games off of people who've just come out of prison and need cash. I've bought video games off of like people who like had it all went in the attic and like didn't that has been up there for 20 years, and they're just like, yeah, I don't know, like whatever.
You sound like a superhero that's only like superpower is just being there when there's like something rare vintage, straight out of prison. Hello there. Do you have any video games?
I will tell you a thing that I don't classify myself as a nerd so much, but I will tell you the nerdiest thing that I do in my life is that when I go to these flea markets and swap meets, I don't wear sunglasses and I don't wear headphones, and it's incredibly boring. And the reason why I don't is because I know the color of vintage plastic, like a Game Boy, Commodore.
Yeah.
I know that color from across the street, and I know the sound.
A superpower. Yeah.
I had literally, someone had recognized me as being sort of the local sort of game buyer guy, and was just walking alongside me and talking one time, and I heard this like tink tink tink, and I was like, "Hey, hang on a second, just hold that thought," and I ran to this stall, and because I knew the sound of an NES hitting the pavement, like I just knew it because I just dealt with them, hundreds and hundreds of them. So anyway, I amass this gigantic video game collection. I get doubles. I sell the doubles through, secondhand through the newspaper and stuff, and that pays for anything that I keep. So the collection ends up costing me nothing, essentially. And so then I find these Star Wars figures, and I'm like, oh bloody hell! Now I'm collecting Star Wars figures because I get some advice from someone I know. And he goes, bloody hell, these are so rare. He goes, honestly, Brent, if you're going to start collecting Star Wars figures, you're starting at the top. He goes, these are the ones that I would need to get to finish collecting. He goes, you've started with these. You've started with the hardest gaps to fill. He goes, everything for you now is downhill. Like, he goes, you can literally, like, you've filled the hardest gaps to fill already by accident. I'm like, bloody hell. So now I'm collecting Star Wars figures, and I do that, and I complete again, for the people who know, I complete the last 17. These are the last 17 Star Wars figures ever made. Complete all of them on card. Then I go and I start 1983, 1980, 1977, and I blah, blah, blah. So I start getting into that. A guy ends up opening the first sort of real serious video game store here in Perth, and he knows that, like, I'm moving house, and this house needs a bunch of renovation stuff in it. So he comes and he buys the whole lot of me. And so that video game collection that cost me $0, and I built up over six years, I sold for about 50 grand. Which now would be 150 grand, that for what I sold him. I mean, you're talking about hundreds of boxed Game Boy games, every Game Boy, this is Game Boy Color, SP, Micro, everything in every colorway. Like,
you probably stocked the entire shop.
Like even rare weird stuff that only came out in Australia. Like, it might be like a Rip Curl surfing branded Game Boy SP that they brought out, or a Billabong branded one, or something like that. And the reason I never, like, I always loved it since then, but basically immediately, that was 2016 when I sold that collection. Almost immediately after that, it became impossible to buy games without having to spend huge dollars. They stopped appearing at flea markets and swap meets and garage sales because everyone kind of had heard that they were worth a lot of money. And so the next time I went to go and buy an N64, because I'd sold mine with the collection, the next time I went to go and buy one, they were almost $200. And I was like, well, the last time I bought an N64, it was $20. So
where are all these big collections going? Because we had on Palmer Luckey, who's the founder of Oculus, and he also founded the mod Retro Chromatic. He is so wealthy that he just went to the I think he found out this person was in the Guinness Book of World Records, had the world's biggest games collection, and he just goes, I'll buy that, and then just buy the games that he doesn't have. So this Palmer Luckey, who's a multi-billionaire, just has a crazy amount of games. I wonder where all of these games and all of these collectibles are going to end up. Because there's only a certain amount of people in this world that are going to pay a certain price for these things. And I just worry that eventually these things are going to be so highly collectible and so sought after that nobody's going to be able to experience these things again unless they're emulated, or Nintendo do, the Nintendo Switch Online stuff, and Sega brings out all this crap. So I wonder where you think it's all going to end up. Is it just going to end up in the hands of 200 games collectors in the world, and that's it?
I guess it depends. Sorry, Ben. I guess it depends because, like, you get people who are collecting them and not using them. I mean, underneath my bed for years, there's been a humongous collection that I've been slowly getting out into different rooms in my house, and I play them all. So I guess it depends if you're somebody who just wants to collect them so you can look at them. And there are these different people in the world. Obviously, there's the people like the three of us who like playing these things and still like that nostalgia. Or you do get someone who's going to create like a museum inside their house. And I guess we almost went to the Embracer archive, didn't we? And we are planning a trip to go at some point, and they are collecting one of every single console and game for people to see them in different times. So again, you've got the people who want to create a museum where no one's going to see them apart from just one person and like, look at what I've got. You've got the players like the three of us, and you've also got the people who are trying to further that for new generations, which is admirable, because if people don't do that, they are going to disappear, like you were saying, Brandon, and then, Brent wouldn't be able to show his children, look at this Sega Saturn, look at this, look at that. If we're not careful, they're just going to die, and they're just going to become so unobtainable that they will finally become dead media, and I just hope that never happens.
Yeah, I don't know that I mean, you got to consider as well, Pog was a good example of like, when you think something's rare, and then you realize that how many people actually kept little pieces of cardboard. There are so many of these videos. Obviously, certain games not so much, right? So, like, how many people have a Castlevania for PS1, which is one of the rarer games, right? The reason it's rare is probably because they didn't make many of them, so that's number one. Two, a bunch of them ended up in the trash, and then what's left over, which is still probably thousands of copies, right? If you think about the rarest, maybe not the rarest, not like your Nintendo, your World Champ carts and the stuff that is like literally super rare because it wasn't for the public. But if you talk about publicly released games, even the rarer end of that is there's still probably hundreds or thousands of copies of that. It's like pick a GameCube game, Pokemon XD. Maybe it's $100 game, or maybe more. I'm not sure now. But even that as being a rare game, there are still thousands of copies of that floating around. So I guess it depends on what you mean as far as like, they can't all end up in the hands of a couple of people, because it means those couple of people would need to have hundreds or even thousands of copies of duplicates of everything, right? How much of it is just sitting in. I think a lot of it got recycled. So in Australia, like when retro games became really hot again in the sort of 2016-17 and that, what happened was our wealthiest sector, which is our mining sector, so people who work in the mining industry, they would come back from their trip on the mines and then go and buy an N64 with a couple of games. So they go into a game store and pay $300 for a 64 with a few games. And then when 2020, when things cooled down a bit, now they don't want to sell those. So now it's funny because they started off in some grandma's cupboard, and then they came out and went into the market, and now they're back in some 30-year-old guy's cupboard. And that, who knows, it might sit there for another 20 years. So like, I don't know, I think that the stuff is around. Do people collect to play? Depends on the mindset. We don't, like, my kids play. I'm not a huge video game player these days, but my kids play games, but they don't really know. Like, they didn't really grow up with that. My kids are sort of 18 and 21, my two older ones, and they play Steam or PS5 or Switch. The oldest console, my oldest kid, the oldest console they played was a Nintendo DS, and they just don't. They don't have any collectible attachment to that console.
Do you think?
So there's no.
Do you think that generation will have an interest in like collecting the older consoles? Because I always wonder. I talked to Sam about this. What happens when our generation passes on and we've got all these collectibles and games? Are the generations younger than us that may be born in 2010, 2020, are they going to want to snag all of our collection for that price, or are we just going to see it as the junk that our grandma still got, like the vintage clocks and the shiny silver cutlery that we just don't want? You know, they just pass it to us. We go, oh bloody hell, I got to get rid of this now.
I wonder that, because so the one my middle kid, they're sort of like 18, 19 years old, heavy duty gamer, PS5 and Steam. At least 3 or 4 times a year, they'll come out and go like, Dad, do you have a PS2 lying around? Because I heard that, Metal Gear Solid is a great game. Or like, do you have a GameCube lying around because I want to play Luigi's Mansion? That's probably because they watched a YouTube video where somebody talked about the origins of this type of game or that type of game, and every now and then they'll ask me to rip out a GameCube or a PS2. But I don't know that they'll collect stuff. Kids seem to be pretty throwaway. I mean, my youngest for sure. I mean, she's 5. Everything is an iPad for her. She doesn't know anything that's not an iPad. She's never maybe a Nintendo Switch she's played for a little bit. I mean, space is limited. I mean, you got your whole world is on this. This is like my music, it's my movies, it's my email, it's everything, right? While I love having like a set of IKEA cubes that has a console in each cube and it looks awesome, I don't know. I don't know whether kids will be into it. I mean, it would suck if they ended up as junk. The hard thing is I don't know whether it can end up as junk just because it has such a value today. Like, have we started when retro games took off in the sort of late 2010s? Did that then cement them as being collectibles? So then, do they now? Not many things become like a collectible and then don't become a collectible again. Even if no one wants them, if you know what I mean. Like, so even if my kids don't want to collect old video games, I don't think that means that they're junk and they get thrown out. But I also don't really know where they end up. You know, do they end up at pubs and stuff where like they set up as like a bit of a fun, nostalgic thing, just like how now you could go into like a pub and play an old Donkey Kong arcade game. You know, it's almost like it's rare and collectible, but it's more like a novelty than it is like a functional piece of equipment. Because I can't see my kids like going like, oh, I've got to get the TV and then find out how to hook AV cables up to this thing, because TVs don't have that anymore. And then I've got to get the cartridges, and then I've got to like set it all up, and then I might play it. And like we were saying before, right? Like you start Mario 64 up, and it's like now I've got to read through 15 pages of why Mario's at the castle because Peach has been kidnapped and blah blah. And now I'm bored and I've had enough. Like, I don't know. That's actually super interesting to think about. Like, what does happen with it? You know, or do they end up being spread out again now, where like every house has some old console that their parents had, just like you said, like, you know, I've got an old teacup and saucer set that was my nan's or whatever. Like, it's in the cupboard somewhere. I'm never going to use it, but it's there. Like,
I wonder if it will go through phases in and out of price reductions and increases as nostalgia comes in, because now, you know, the typical games and collectibles, they were quite affordable 20 years ago, because, you know, we were all kids, we were growing out of it. But now that we're coming into adulthood and a lot of us have, you know, jobs, we've got money now and we want to share it with our kids, it's coming in more of a demand. But when we start to chip our boots and start all passing away, our younger generation will go, you know what, have all that for £100, no worries. So you get that kind of bubble pop, and then all of a sudden the prices increase again and again and again. But I think that's for the more, you know, the non-collectible, the stuff that's got high quantity. I think that will go in and out. But the more artistic stuff, the highly collectible, the museum pieces, I think they will sustain their value and be looked at as, you know, a form of history, so to speak.
And that's where stuff like grading comes in, right? You know, that's where grading comes in, is this like taking something that is nostalgic and even and you know you're not going to use it. So, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to have it. So like to kind of have something just like people collect artwork. There's no reason that a copy of Alex the Kid in Miracle World in its case is not looked at the same as a piece of artwork is looked at. And people can look at it and go like, wow, look at that. That's like 50 years old, and that's how people played video games back then.
And it strikes a memory, doesn't it? Like, I'm not saying, typical art on a wall is a little bit, one-dimensional, whereas video games is an art, and even trading cards and comics, I feel like that can take you down, memory lane and take you to a time where it is quite nostalgic, so it has a bit more power to it. But that's where I think the kind of future of collectibles is. I don't know what your opinions are, if you have any thoughts about where you think all this is gonna go. Do you think these trademarks and licenses are gonna live on for a long period of time, which keeps collectibles value? What do you think people should be collecting if they want to look at it as an investment? I believe Pokemon's quite a good investment in terms of longevity when we're all gone, only because at this moment in time they've got such a wide footprint. It's literally everywhere. It's not like it's gonna die off, in my opinion, like some other brands
That's a hard
have,
thing
like
to speculate. It's a hard thing to speculate, but especially something like Pokemon, which is so widespread. They release so many products a year, or not, maybe not a year, but they release so many products. It's an ongoing venture. Pokemon cards, and look. I'll be honest. I never played Pokemon cards. I don't have a heavy interest in them, but I am someone who does buy things in bulk and then holds on to them for a bunch of years. I'm not sure if I have to the right of me. I have dozens and dozens of boxes of trading cards from the 80s and 90s. I bought them when they were $20 a box, and now they're $200 a box. It only took 7 or 8 years for that to happen. And I did that a bit with Pokemon as well. So when Shining Fates came out, I had a trading card shop who wanted to deal in sports cards but had to buy Pokemon as part of his contract with his distributor. So I bought all of his ETBs, all of his Elite Trainer boxes off of him for Shining Fates. So I had 20 or 30 Shining Fates Elite Trainer boxes.
Good set to start with, that one.
At a pretty good, And so I just shoved them in a box, and I was like, cool, we're not touching those, like, for a while. And then when the next one came out, which I think was called Sword and Shield, or was it Battle Styles?
You're in the Sword. So Shining Fates, was that XY? Is that the XY generation, or was that still Sword and Shield?
I'm not sure.
I should know this because I do collect them.
There's Shining Fates, and then there was one that came out after it, but it turned out that the set that came out after it, which I think might have been called Battle Styles, maybe. It just didn't. There wasn't any huge chase card in that set, and so what happened is that Shining Fates had this really great value retention. Like, it held a lot of its value, and I ended up making money on those boxes in the future because I believe there's a Charizard or something in there that's a $500 or $600 card if you can pull it. Whereas the set that came out after it just didn't have anything. Whatever it was, there was nothing in the box that struck really hard with collectors, and that set kind of fizzled out. And so you went from like something like Shining Fates, where you could never get it in the shops. You couldn't go to a department store in Australia and buy a box because everyone was snapping them up, to this next set that came out, and all the collectors collectively decided that it wasn't as good. And then, so that one I ended up losing money on. And I like doing that. I do that with a lot of stuff. Every time a commemorative stamp set comes out, like if it's like Star Wars 40, it was the 40th anniversary of The Empire Strikes Back a few years ago. They had a packet, a booklet with 10 stamps in it for $10. I bought a bunch of them. Now those $10 packs go for $80. Because
I bought some of those recently, not Star Wars ones. They did a Transformers one maybe a couple of years back that I snagged. It was my first dabble into stamps and coins, which was interesting.
Yeah, and I'm not interested in stamps or coins, but I know the market of like, well, this is an Australian only release. of Australian postage stamps for a 40th anniversary of a movie. Now that we're 4 or 5 years removed from that movie,
Mm.
now I've got people who are overseas who would love to get their hands on a limited edition Australian stamp set, and so like that's where you can increase the value. Like video games are the same, right? Like Mario's always going to be kind of pretty hot, as compared to say, then you got some games that are so bad that they're highly collectible because they didn't make many of them. It's a bit like the ET,
Yeah.
the no, not the ET. It's more like trying to think of like one, but like how Banjo Tooie and Conker's Bad Fur Day and some of those games on N64 are like really valuable. I think
Yeah.
someone here.
There's one on Game Boy about a potato. You can literally play as a
Spud's
potato,
Adventure.
and it's worth
Yeah.
loads of money.
Same thing.
Right,
Yeah, I was
and-
looking at Kingsley's Adventure for the PS1. It's like a cross between Banjo and Zelda, but it's now worth hundreds of pounds when you buy that for the PS1 because it was just this kind of this game that probably was supposed to compete with both of those games, but didn't take off as well as it should have done. But it's awesome, and I just play it on Gamma on the iPhone because I haven't managed to find a copy, and it is very rare. And when it does, when you do find one, you're looking at a couple of $100s. But you're right, like the series like Pokemon and Zelda and Mario, they have got such longevity, which means people are more likely to go back and look at the older games, which means they're probably going to stay alive for longer, and those older ones are going to be more interesting to somebody who maybe if you're thinking about Banjo, they get to nuts and bolts and they think, oh, there's only been 3 games of these aren't as good as the other ones. But then there will be those people who think, actually, you know what, Banjo 2 is fucking awesome, I'm going to get that. And that's why the price ramps up so much. I guess you've got to be somebody like you who knows the worth of things and has put in the time and the effort and gone around and done the market research on your Sunday mornings from 3 a.m. till 9 a.m., actually like looking for stuff and finding things and knowing the worth of stuff. I don't know whether people are going to have that knowledge in 10, 20, 30 years' time because they haven't perhaps done the groundwork that you have. And they haven't because a lot of people don't realize how much work you have to put into sort of like search through listings and listings of Pokemon Fire Red to find the one that's got the little chip in the left-hand corner, or how many people have bought Pokemon Leaf Green and got it home and found out that it's just a reproduction, and that's just like base level things that are quite easy to spot. Whereas, how many people are going to have the skill of knowing what a SNES sounds like when it drops onto a curb, and that's like niche knowledge that you need to know for market reselling and stuff like you do, I guess, isn't it?
It became interesting for me because it is a part of childhood. Like I wouldn't have been collecting video games if it wasn't a part of my childhood. I didn't play a lot of them. Like I didn't play a lot of video games. I owned a Mega Drive and I probably had 3 or 4 games. So if by that logic, it doesn't make sense that I try and collect all 400, 600, whatever games it was that came out for that thing. But as someone who's a grown up with grown up money, who's just like, I'm now living in a life where, as a kid, you couldn't possibly ever like fathom being able to just acquire all these games. If we were just saying, right, £45 in Australia, that's about $100. To look at for me to look at 200 or 300 video games on a shelf and just go, bloody hell, like. If this was 1993, I'd be looking at a fortune right here. This would be, you'd have to be so wealthy to be able to have this. And so there's a little bit of that as well of going like, even though I'm picking the games up for a couple of bucks a piece because people are like throwing them out, there's still like this, like, man, like, one, who kept it? That's crazy that someone even is keeping this stuff. 2, like, how they spent that kind of money back then, which is kind of wild to me. Even now, thinking of like, I remember when the PS1 came out, and like we rented one from a video store, and it was like $100 bond, like $100 like deposit, and then it was like $50 for the night. And at the time, it only had like NBA Jam and Destruction Derby, and like, but even that was $50 plus the games were probably a few dollars each. I mean, that's a big investment for 2 nights. So like, And now PS1s, they're everywhere. It's just what it's. They're just, you know, I don't know. It's the whole rotating concept of collectability and like who wants them? Who wanted them back then? Who wants them now? Who doesn't want them now? Do my kids care? Do my kids really care that like I've got in my front lounge, I've got a boxed N64 and a boxed Super NES just stacked up, and I love them just for the box. I don't even need to play them. I just love the box. It's just like this is just like me walking into a Toys R Us in 1994 and just picking this up and grabbing it off the shelf and just going, "Wow, this is like I think they were like $399, like new or something."
Yeah.
Which was a ton of money. That's not even a Christmas present for me. That's like Christmas and birthday and Easter and that's everything. It's all rolled into
Yeah.
one. A $400 purchase in 1994.
I
it's
want to
Go on,
round
Brandon.
off, if that's all right, Seb. Only because it's late for Brent. The final question I want to ask is where are you putting your money now in terms of collectibles? And more of a focus on investment, I guess. Like, what are you buying now that 5, 10, 15, 20 years do you think will be a good investment?
I'm always looking around at different things. So like I said to you before, I do speculate on some new things. Like so if I find that something's not popular, like video games have taught me that the less popular stuff tends to have some sort of like niche collectability in the future, whether it's Sega 32X or something like that. So sometimes I will find where I'm lucky that I have the ability to have a bit of cash behind me if I need to pick up on something. But like if something's really limited release, if it's got a lot of nostalgia in it, I'll pick it up. Or I'll pick up a bunch of them. Like I said, with the stamp sets as well. Video games, I don't know. Because they're so not physical, like Nintendo Switches, they have physical games and that. But you'll see, somebody showed me recently, that there are companies that are bringing out like limited box sets of games. There was a great game on the Neo Geo back in the day called Windjammers. It's like it's like beach volleyball frisbee game, and a company recently brought out a reissue of that and it comes with an actual frisbee in the box, and it's all like amazing.
I think
Like,
that
so the
company's called
companies-
Limited Run Games.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. And so I saw that and I was like, man, I don't even collect video games anymore, but like that almost makes me want to buy it because it's so cool, and because it's such a talking point as well. Because when not everyone knows what Windjammers is, and so when you tell someone like, no, you gotta, this is like actually, it's beach frisbee, but a video game, and it's awesome. Uh, and so like I like things that are talking points. If I look around, like in front of me here, I've got, I managed to pick up cheap, this, Shack Attack. So Shaquille O'Neal had his own
Yes.
range of toys that were released by Kenner in the 90s, and they're cheap. Or at least they were cheap when I got them, which wasn't that long ago. I've got a DMG clear case. I've got a Game Boy Color clear. I've got a couple of Sony mini disc players. Mini discs.
Nice, yeah, they're coming back in.
Yep, yeah. Original mini discs as well. So like the actual and the album, not a pre-recorded mini disc, not the ones that you record yourself, but the actual official released albums. Super hard to find. Laser discs. I like laser discs sometimes. What have I got over there? I've got a red PS2 Cinnabar Red from Japan, which is worth a few $100. That I picked up for $20. I sometimes will go on a run of like I'm looking over here. I've got Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, and a whole series of Batman action figures that are still on the card. You can buy these in bulk on card from 1994 for about pounds, probably 10 to 15 pounds each. If you get them in bulk, because they were pretty common and they weren't super popular, but I sell those now for $40 each. So, obviously you guys weren't not super huge into toys, but like do you remember the Star Wars figures that came out in the 90s? They were like when they started redoing the special edition movies.
Are they like the sets, the play sets?
No, just the individual action figures. They were called the Power of the Force, and they came out in the 90s. Um,
I don't
you
think I
can pick
remember
those.
those.
No, okay. You can pick those up really, really cheap, literally a few dollars each.
Hmm.
One little story is that the initial sculpt for Princess Leia is really ugly. She's butt ugly. So they actually call her monkey face Leia because she
Jeez.
just looks. You Google it. It's funny. So anyway, the joke with all those figures is that they're all buff. They're like all Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, or they're all like huge. It was almost like they took a He-Man figure and turned it into a Star Wars figure. So they're really anatomically not correct to the movies and that, but they're all official. So anyway, this monkey face Leia, which is like worthless because it's terrible, you can pick those up for a couple of bucks each. I bought 110 of them off a guy for $3 each. He had
Damn.
110 mint on card monkey face Leias, three
What do you
dollars
mean by
each,
mint on card?
Like still in
meaning
the
that they're
packet and everything,
Oh,
and
the
brand
card
new.
that on the back of the action
yeah,
figure.
yeah.
Got you, got
Yeah,
you.
brand new and unopened from 1994. So I have 105 of them sealed in a box out the back in my warehouse somewhere, and I have no intention of opening that box for another 5 or 6 years.
Mm.
But because it was so unpopular, and the video games taught me that the unpopular stuff, not always, but like unpopular stuff does end up getting like a little niche following. It's kind of like the it's so bad it's good kind of thing. Um,
Yeah.
You're
so
making me wish
yeah,
I
like
kept all my Power Rangers stuff now, man. I wish I'd have kept all that Power Rangers stuff, and I wish I'd
oh,
have kept
Power Rangers.
that Alakazam card that I sold to Adam down my street for £8 when I was a kid. That Pokemon card. I think about that on a daily basis. I think about I selling that for £8, and I'm like, it was probably the biggest regret of my life. I think that and getting rid of my Megazord on eBay for about £20. That original Megazord. I
You've
wish I
given
had
me a
that
second.
still.
You've given me a second to think here. You're asking me where I would put my money now in investment, right? Oh, this is the honest truth is that like I would invest time, right? So all of the I've probably made hundreds of thousands of dollars over the last 15 years buying and selling video games, action figures, trading cards, you name it, whatever. Sometimes I just run across random stuff and I'll just go like, yeah, that's worth more than I'm going to pay for it. I'd invest your time. There's so many. We were just talking. There's so many video games out there, right? If we're gonna talk in that, there's so many video games. There's so many Pokemon cards. There's millions of them out there. They're not all ending up in landfill. A lot of this stuff is still in the homes of the people that are around you, right? And that if you like were took the time to sort of like hit garage sales, swap meets, flea markets, whatever, like, and just and ask. It's not about like what they've got there. Just because someone doesn't have what you're looking for there doesn't mean that it's not sitting in the cupboard. And I'm a testament to that. Works a lot of the
Mm.
time. Even now, when I see someone who's selling has some VHS tapes, and I go, oh, no video games, and they're like, oh, we've got this old Sega thing at home, we didn't bring it out. This was like 2 weeks ago. So, like, that is still the case now. And if you can invest anything, I would say like take the time to hit the ground running. I I own a business. Like I would have no shame and no problem in printing a bunch of flyers and putting them in people's letterboxes in my local area and just going, "Hey, I buy these things." Like I'll buy any old toys, old video games, this, that, whatever off of you. Like, yeah, why not? Why not? Like,
You're very personable as well, like, taking your headphones off and walking around and chatting with people, like, people don't seem to communicate person to person at these things anymore. It is all over eBay. Like I said, if you go speak to somebody who in your local neighborhood or is at a swap meet, you then, like you have done, quickly become known as the nice guy that buys retro stuff. And, just
they know
speaking
that
one-on-one to,
they
yeah,
know
speaking
that if
one-on-one
they've
to a
got
person and
something
being
and I
kind and
buy it,
happy. Yeah, exactly. They're
yeah,
going to get cash and they're going
yep.
to make you happy. They're happy, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that nice lad down the street. He'll buy that N64. You're not just you're a face who they can connect to. You're not just a guy behind the keyboard." And I think that's the most important thing, that people know that you're gonna, it's going to a good place, it's going to a good home, and you're a nice person to deal with.
It's like any business, right? If you in any business, no matter what it is, no one's going to know that you're the guy unless you let people know that you're the guy, right? So whether this is no one's going to know that you're a plumber unless you start telling people somehow that you're a plumber. Whether that's you advertise it publicly or whether you start telling people one on one that you're a plumber, no one's going to know. And so the same thing goes for this, right? Is that you go like, do you have this? Do you have that? oh, if you do, like, here's my number or whatever, and I'll happily take that stuff. And you're already in their good graces now because you're being friendly and stuff. And on the flip side as well, like, I don't give people grief when I've had plenty of times when someone had a Game Boy on the ground, and I say, how much do you want for the Game Boy? And they say, I want $150 for it because I saw on Google that these are worth $600 now, or $1,000 now. And they didn't bother to read that the one that went for $1,000 like belonged to an ex-dev for Nintendo or something, right? That's fine. I'm not going to win this argument with this person. They've made up their mind. That's all good. Have a nice day. So,
Yeah.
But I'm around a lot. Even now, I still go to those places. I still have the people who know me and wave. And I have people come up and show me stuff. Like last weekend, I was looking around at some things, and I had a guy come up to me and say, "Hey, Brent, look what I picked up this morning." And he opened up a bag full of like Sega Mega Drive stuff. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool, man! Like, what a great pickup! Like, bummer I wasn't here 20 minutes earlier. Otherwise, I would have snapped that up." You know, but like now people know me as that guy. People will call me up, want to know what I think something's worth or whatever, and I'm sort of out of that field now, so like I'm not totally up to date on it. Last time I tried to look at like the pricing on retro video games, it kind of scared me because some of it was like, wow, that's some like big bucks.
Well, listen, before we go, I've got Mario Tennis up here, and it's going for 800 quid special deal today. So after this podcast, just let me know, all right?
Yeah,
He'll
well,
give
if you want
two
to
monkey face layers for it.
Well, if the sticker says 45 quid, right? So let's start there. And if you want to come down on that a little bit, just due to its age, and the fact that, like, well, you know what my trick is? As I say, when someone's got a console and it's got the red, yellow, white AV cables on it, I'm like, "Have you tested it?" And they're like, "Ah, work." I'll be like, "Yeah, but you haven't tested it because you haven't got a TV to test it, do you?" And they're like, "All right, $20."
You take a pair of scissors and just snip the wire. Like, look, mate, is this wire's broken, man? Give on, knock $20 off.
Oh, yeah, but people do it all the time, especially the old like Ataris and stuff that only have like the aerial, the antenna cable. I'm like, there's no way to play this. TVs don't even have an analog tuner in them anymore. So even if it literally will not work, like you need adapters or you need an old TV or something like that. I see that you guys you do a lot of reviews on sort of like new like emulation consoles and stuff that come out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So we get a lot of, Brandon's made his mark on handhelds, like emulation handhelds and stuff over the years, and we do a lot of the consoles that you can and the HDMI cables and the adapters, so you can plug your GameCube into your your 4K TV and all that kind of stuff, and we try and cover all aspects. But what people can't see at the minute is that my laptop is actually sitting on a Toshiba CRT, so I can get the proper head height. So we try and cover all bases. From we'll do mod kits that you can use, so you can use original controllers with CRTs. We've got the analog 3D coming so that we can play 4K, play N64 games without emulation in 4K.
Oh, I saw that. That's amazing. So analog do a lot of the high end. Analog do like the high end refurb sort of, because it uses original. Does it use original chips and stuff?
It's technically FPGA, which is like a high end form of emulation, but just emulates in a way that replicates the hardware. So it's not original, but it's it kind of is.
It's nice.
No emulation is kind of it's kind of, I guess, which way you look at it, but it looks really good. We've got a 3. Have you got your you can see on there, you've got your analog pocket on the side, haven't you? Mine's somewhere, but there's so much stuff to review in this office. It's getting crazy.
These are quite limited. Like this company, there was only I think a few thousand of these made. That's the analog pocket. It plays a bunch of cartridges and it does emulation. But the new company that we're friends with, Mod Retro, they want to create the perfect kind of Game Boy Advance. It's like made of metal, like anodized metal. It just plays Game Boy Color games.
You're getting excited about Advance already, aren't you? Because they've kind of teased it. That's the next one. But the
BMG
and Color games on that, It's amazing, and
Right.
that's like he's basically we did a podcast with Palmer, and he's basically spent a lot of money creating the ultimate tribute to the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color. So like where you
See,
can
that
get
I
like
like. I like that because
yeah
I feel like you could. I wouldn't take this DMG here. Like, I wouldn't take it on a plane because it just, like
Hmm.
visually, it's bulky and it's battery and whatever. Like, and the screen sucks or whatever. But like something like that is new but looks kind of old and is kind of flashy. Like, that is really cool. Like, I could see myself having that on me to take on a
And I'm,
flight
I'm
or something.
hoping like this kind of modern tech ignites people to get back into collecting hardware, physical games, and so on. So this is why I spoke about what's going to happen when we're old and we're dying and we've got all this collection. I'm hoping like these things keep coming out that excites the new kids on the block and go, you know what, I actually do want to buy Pokemon on Game Boy Color. You know what, I do like it. Now I want to buy it boxed and sealed and who's got it and so on.
I'm worried about you. You've mentioned death about 8 times on this podcast. I think we need to have a conversation after this ends because you've been very deep today.
It's been a long few weeks, mate. I've looked at the rope a few times this week, so I'm wondering, what's my collection worth for
If you
Rowan?
need to write your will, get me in it ASAP because I want all that stuff you've got. I want first dibs on that before your family,
That
mate.
is
So
an,
let's be talking about
that
that.
is an interesting thing actually. I had to have when I sold that video game collection to pay for timber flooring through an entire 2-story home. I actually had to have multiple meetings with the tax department, with the tax office, because I was about to I was between selling the video games and then selling those Star Wars figures that I had. I was about to basically have almost $100,000 put in my bank account, a lump sum, and that's not a good look unless the government or someone else knows where it came from, right?
Yeah.
So I actually had
Interesting.
to I had to have really full on conversations about video games to the Australian tax office and prove to them that I didn't buy them for the purpose of reselling, and that how did I get them, where did I get them, when, over what period of time did
How
I
do you
buy them?
prove to the government that you picked this up from a guy's back garden, like in his shed for
Because you heard
$5?
the
Like,
sound
I
of
promise
it.
you, I only bought 300 monkey layers for $3. Show me the receipt. There is no receipt. It's just a man with a van.
Surely, if they see you've got 300 monkey layers, they're just like, let's just leave this guy alone. Like, you know?
Like, yeah, something wrong with this guy. Um, no, it was basically what it was. Is this is probably valuable for anyone who does have like a gigantic collection, because they can pull you up on these things. Is like they basically try to bluff you out, ask you a bunch of questions, and say like, why did you have this? Why would you want to have 6,000 games and 400 consoles? Like, where did you get them? When did you get them? And it's not about proving when and where I got them. It was more just about like, yeah, well, I collect video games, and I would go, and I had to say, like, I go to swap meets on Sunday mornings, and I would, like, get the ones I need for the collection, and the ones that I didn't need, I'd put on Gumtree, and someone would come and pay me, and the money I made from that would pay for the ones I kept, and so on and so forth, and then it just, and yeah, like, there was a process of about a couple of weeks, and they gave me an exemption to have a lump sum of cash in my account from the sale of video games, which was kind of interesting. But it is something that I think about now as well. Like, I narrowed down my collection, so at home I still have vintage Star Wars toys, but only R2D2 stuff. I only collect the character R2D2. Video games, I have an N64, and I've got PlayStation stuff, but I really only collect Sega Master System stuff. It was the first console I had. So I have 2 different boxed Sega Master Systems, different variations on the box, and I have a dozen or so games, but just, all the Wonder Boys, all the Alex Kids, the Action Replay cart, and a couple of, like, sort of harder to find things. So, like, I still collect, but it's extremely selective. Like, now it's not a matter of, like, I need to get them all. I don't need to catch them all. I just need to sort of have the things that sort of trigger me in a true nostalgic way, not just a sort of like a trying to complete the set kind of way. Like you said, you're a handheld guy, right? So, like, is it just, for you, is it is it more a case of like, if you were to get a bulk lot of video games, is the handheld stuff the stuff you keep and the rest you sort of move on, or how does that work with you?
Yeah, pretty much. I think it's similar to you. What strikes you nostalgically? What's kind of unique that you don't see everywhere and you want to keep because you're greedy and you want to be one of the only people with it? And then the rest that doesn't really interest me usually goes. It's usually the console stuff that I sell, but the handheld stuff I usually keep. Yeah.
I think Brent's asking because he's just coming to a big stack of DMGs of a warehouse, and I think he's thinking, I know a guy who could buy these. I see it in his eyes. He's always thinking. This kid. He's always thinking.
Shipping that from Perth, you're gonna need a container.
Oh,
sorry,
boy,
he's got those monkey layers to pay for it, pal. It's fine.
Yeah, it's the only handheld I don't have here with me. The one that I am most likely to keep is my Sega Nomad. I never had one.
Oh yeah,
as a
nice.
kid. I never had one as a kid, and it's got the rechargeable. It's got the rechargeable battery pack and stuff on it, so it's in really nice shape. And like, I never had one as a kid. It was way too expensive, and so that's still something that I keep. That is not something I had as a kid, but is like, haha, I got one now. Like that's there are plenty of times where I'm like, I finally got it, even if it's not worth like. It's not like a holy grail thing. It's not like it's worth squillion dollars or anything, but it is sort of like, I think I said before we like officially sort of started, I was saying how I opened a pack of basketball cards and pulled out this Michael Jordan card that's worth $20. Who cares? Except for the fact that for like a second, I went straight back to being like 7 years old, thinking like, if I was outside the corner shop, and if I had have pulled that card out at the time, being 7 years, that I would have just gone like, I've hit the jackpot. Like, I've hit the lotto of like basketball cards. Because as a kid, your money doesn't go far, right? As a kid, you're getting pocket money's 50 cents, $1, whatever it is. Yeah.
Well, Brent, thank you for coming on again. No doubt we'll have to pull you on when maybe in like 2030 when the monkey face Laylas are worth $100 a pop. We'll get you back on.
When you're sitting in a house made out of gold from selling them all.
You didn't even touch on the fact that I bought 30,000 VHS tapes and was all over the TV and radio for that. What is it?
God
what was
damn.
the other?
This is the thing. I think we just get Brent on every couple of months so he can tell us more collecting tales, because maybe that's a whole different branch of podcast, man. This man's got so many stories that we can dive into. The collecting enigma that is Brent.
Put a nice suit on, and every month I just come and do like a speculator's report.
Yeah, listen, we've got a new feature without even realising it. That's going to make my job a lot easier. We can have just Brent coming on once a month doing this. Tell you.
What's hot in February? Mini discs.
Monkey Toad R2D2. What the fuck?
You're gonna. You laugh, but like both of your search histories after we've finished this conversation are both going to have Monkey Face Layer in them, and you're going to have to wipe.
Why do you think I've been googling? I've been on my phone while we've been doing this. I've bought 10,000 of them, so
Yeah.
If it doesn't work out, yeah. I just sold Mario Tennis to pay for them all. It's fine.
Actually, you know what? Honestly, I do like. Honestly, sorry, I will let you go, but I am having fun for real. You know what I think is probably, because if we want to talk about stuff that's collectible, displays as art, and is becoming very rare, and I personally love animation cells.
Animation cells.
Yeah,
like old Disney movies and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, but for any cartoon, right? So I have hand painted animation cells from the Street Fighter animated series, and the real Ghostbusters.
We need to come to your house, man. We need to come to your house on a business trip and just spend. Be like going to the Embracer archive, but just in Australia instead.
But yeah, like animation cells are so cool because they are literally artwork, and they don't use animation cells anymore. They don't hand paint cells anymore. It's all done on
There's
computers.
something cool that Pokemon did back in the day. They took the film strips of the Pokemon movie and put them in little collectible cards. So it's almost like an actual physical piece of the movie, which I think is really cool. And that's the kind of stuff that I really like and kind of want to invest in. The really weird shit, but it just makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Weird, oddball stuff. That was always the rarest stuff in the video game. You know, when I had stuff that you could only win in competitions, and that stuff becomes, you know, really valuable, even though in essence it's not. It's nothing that special. I think I mentioned to you on the POG one that I had an N64 Jungle Green, and it was in a wooden crate, and the crate was filled with
clay. I'm very jealous of this.
Yeah. So and it looked like it had come from the jungle, and it had DK64 burned into the side. And the only way you could get that, there were only 50 of them made, and the only way you could get it was to submit you completing Donkey Kong Country on the Super NES via VHS tape, and then they would send you an N64, which was obviously the next gen console at the time. And I found one, like a guy just had it up on. He just advertised it as a Nintendo 64 console, but it just happened to still be in the crate and everything. And I just went and picked it up for $50, and it ended up being worth like $1,000. So, but in essence, It's still just a regular Jungle Green 64. It's worth a couple of $100. But the story behind it, you know, I spent years. I spent years trying to find a scan on the internet of the advertisement to win it. And I can't even remember whether I even did find that advertisement. But yeah, but everyone I knew in the world, they were like, "Holy crap! I remember hearing about it in the Nintendo magazine." But I forgot it, so, yeah.
Well,
go on, Brandon.
Thanks for coming on, Brent. Super appreciated. Yeah, we'll definitely have to get you on again. I think Seb will write up a really cool piece for this, just to help our collectible friends out there and to play with my curiosity as well. So appreciate you coming on. And where can people find you if they? I don't know if you even share your collection on socials and stuff. I might be wrong.
Not a great deal, but I'd be more than happy to do that to coincide with this coming out. I'll take a bunch of snaps of some stuff that I've got, and I'll have it to coincide with this and that. Yeah.
And just know, if you have a collection somewhere, Brent will find you. If you have a collection that you wanted to get rid of, no matter where you are in the world, you'll get a knock on your door, or
even if you're in jail,
flyer through your post box, or if you just come out of jail.
Remember, I can smell a Game Boy, right? So
exactly. Can you, if I put this Game Boy on the, do you know what that is? Can you tell me
show up?
Do it again. That sounds dull. That doesn't sound like a.
That's just my life, man.
Yeah.
That's a Game Boy Color.
There you go.
Awesome, man.
All right.
Thank you very much.
That is a real thing. That is a real thing. I don't wear sunglasses at the swap meet, even if the sun's in my eyes, because I know I can spot a purple GameCube from across the street.
I just picture you walking up the street like, out the way, I'm coming.
Yeah.
All right, we'll end the podcast there. Thanks, Brent.
Cool. Thank you.